All right, so welcome to this episode of Pivot Play. I'm Jerry Thompson. I'm here today with my very good friend, Rashiid Coleman. Sheed, happy to have you on.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so I can call you Sheed. That's cool.
You know that, brother. Come on now. We go way back.
Yeah, so so what we're going to talk about largely in this episode, I believe, is we're going to talk a little bit about creativity, the creative process. And I think when I don't know how often people even think about creativity and what that means. But the interesting thing about you is, in my mind, you are certainly a creative, but at the same time, an analytic. So we'll talk about what it means to have both of those existing in the same brain. But just to just to go back a bit, let's talk about our relationship. Do you remember how we met?
I want to say it was through Reg.
Through Reg, you guys. So this is going years back. I think you guys had come to Chester to a church there. So we kind of met on the music tip, and Reggie and I connected. And then our connection came sometime after that. It's funny, you roll this stuff back and it's like, relationships at some point to be long lasting have to become sticky, as I call it. And I honestly don't remember when that happened with us. I have zero recollection of
it. As I recall, I think it was when we started building out your studio.
Oh, wow. You were part of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is going back a ways.
Yeah.
I remember is we had two guys that were like 6'6", so they were doing all the high work, and we were doing all the low work.
Exactly.
Because they could just reach up and talk. Okay, so that's what's up, man. I appreciate you guys were there to help bring that phase of Jet World Studios together back in the day.
Yeah.
And then I think so that's the music piece. So that sort of begins to speak to some of the creative part of it. But then I think we came to understand that we think and process things in a similar way, to the point that we actually wrote a book together, The Believer's Guide to the Law of Attraction, some years ago. But so just for help me remember, maybe for the audience, what to you has made our friendship sticky over these years?
That's a good question. I'd have to say probably synchronicity. It seems like our journeys and our paths are very much in sync.
Right.
So we seem to be able to, we certainly don't have time to talk every day,
right?
But it seems like every time we reconnect, we're like on the same page as it pertains to, a new wave in life or something we're learning or discovering.
Yeah. So without question, now that I think about it, we can go weeks or months and not speak. And then when we reconnect, of all the different things that you could be talking about or thinking about, we happen to be very much on the same page without the benefit of daily communication. So if you think about that over a period of years, that's an oddity in terms of how connections between human beings are built. But that is an absolute fact. I'm reading this book. I'm reading this book about that, and this is same subject matter, maybe different titles. That I think that we've been able to support each other. So in terms of the Pivot Play podcast, it really is designed around this idea of taking a pivot, which is, if you think about it in like basketball terms, right, which I know you played some, is taking a firm position on one foot, and it's from that anchored position that you're then able to quickly pivot and go in a different direction from a point of stability, right? The pivot gives you stability. It's usually a pause, if not a total stop, but then it's that ability to use that anchor to go in a different direction. And I think this has been true throughout, human history, but even more so and what we're dealing with the COVID pandemic, what's happening in the economy, what's happening to the job market, as we were talking about, there's going to be even a greater need that people be able to pivot, right? Find a point of stability and go in a different direction. That new direction may not be anything like what they were used to doing or what they've known in the past. And so I also know you to be someone who's an avid reader. So you're constantly testing, your perspective, right? Taking in new information and refactoring. So when we think about what that pivot means, just talk about how you see it in terms of the current circumstance that we're in and what you think people might need to do.
Yeah, I believe that the pivot has been optional up to now.
Okay.
And I think the leaders of fields, no matter what that field of play might have been in times past, people had the luxury of saying, oh, okay, I'm ready for change. I want to move forward in this regard or down this new avenue. But now the world has drastically changed in a matter of one business quarter, a little over 100 days, I think now. And it's essential. People are going to have to fast track developing new modalities, really moving beyond hobbyist interests in certain things and learning how to leverage those things now to monetize them, to industrialize them. So it's essential now. We got to be able to kind of stop on a dime, change direction, and be able to manage these things simultaneously if you still have, kind of your bread and butter that's happening.
Right. So, so essential is a word we could talk about because I agree with you that I believe it's essential. If you want to give yourself your best shot, right?
Sure.
But I think that there's some people too that are just holding on, hoping that it returns to what it was. And maybe some of that is just, humans and their challenges would change overall. But I think some people are holding on. I don't know if they see it as essential. What do you see happening to those people?
Wow. Well, I hope I'm not the first person that people are going to hear this from, but they are going to be the unfortunate casualties of this tsunami.
Right.
Unfortunately, no one really is prepared for a tsunami when it hits.
Right.
And this is how it's going to happen. Like, just being tumbled over and over by this wave of progress. Because I really don't see this pandemic as altogether bad. Now, the loss of lives, the way people have experienced losses in families is certainly tragic, right? And I think that's an understatement for some people. But I do see the opportunity in this pandemic or this episode that if you can reinvent yourself, if you can reposition yourself, if you can pivot, then you really can put yourself in a position to do some pretty incredible things.
Right. And so I think that history would prove that that's always been the case, and is for the people who can see something different. And so in order to see something different, and this is where imagination and creativity comes into it. So even in the midst of just craziness. So for you personally, how do you see your sense of imagination, which, let me just throw this in. Typically, as we get older, the opportunity to imagine and to dream is usually kind of sucked out of us, right? With replacing it with life responsibilities and sensibilities around things that we have to do and get done. And so most people don't spend a lot of time in their imagination. But so to me, I see it as the way that we evolve. But for you, what role does imagination and creativity play as pertains to creating new opportunities?
It's the key. For me, the only way I see it, I'm very visual. So the way I see it and imagine it is like imagination is the copulation, the intimate act that occurs before the big bang of creativity. You know what I'm saying?
You might have to unpack that one a little bit.
Okay. So imagination is really a borderless or lineless, if you will, portrait. It gives you the license to create or make up whatever it is that you can think, right? And that's probably what I should say. It's that borderless and lineless capacity to think, right? To capture these images that burst out of the mind. It would seem spontaneously, but things that have kind of been rolling around and tumbling around from influences from our own self-generated ideas. I think it's like this rebirthing of the child in us,
Right.
which kind of erupts into these moments of creativity where we're expressing what we're imagining.
Right. So with that, so I usually put that in terms of this is my cartoon self. Right. This is the one that even if I get smashed by an anvil, they just redraw me back in the next frame. Like it's all good. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a million lives. I can fly. I can breathe fire. I can do anything in my imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's kind of, for me, it's my cartoon self. If that makes any sense at all.
Perfect to me.
And so also as a musician and a producer, the creative process, right? And I think this, and people who don't understand this, maybe because they haven't been around or experienced it, but that is also a place where both the creative mind and the analytical mind kind of come together, especially if you are, a step beyond the artist, right? If you're the artist, maybe someone just puts something in front of you, play this, sing that, and it's a wrap. But when you are the one who's creating everything, and then you are the hands behind the machine, you're the one, using the software and the mixer and all that. And again, I may be saying more than people understand, but I think you also see where there's a place where imagination moves into reality, right? Comes out of our minds and it starts to become a thing. So maybe we can use some of our experience in music production to talk about some of the frustrations that can come in to where sort of when that transformation has happened between the imagination and the reality, how things don't always come out exactly the way we want, or we realize in that moment, dang, there's something I don't know about this, right? And we've seen that, whether it's this piece of equipment, this piece of software. And so then we have to vacate the creative process and our imagination to go do some real practical learning and gaining some new skills. And the better we get at that, the more we can facilitate these ideas, our cartoon selves bringing something into the physical world. I see you shaking your head, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's you expressed it very eloquently, bro. Like that's the process. And I'm grateful that at least for me, I'm able to work through both of those processes simultaneously oftentimes. So, both spheres of my brain are firing at the same time when I run into one of those challenges. But I do think when you were talking, I thought, there's probably something we take for granted when it comes to creativity, and that is courage. To fight through that discovery that I don't know something, or to fight through that epiphany that there's definitely something different about what I've just created and what is being monetized or what is popular or mainstream, it takes courage to work through that, to assimilate the new information, to develop the new skill and stay with it.
So when you say courage, one of the things that I thought about, so I want to make sure we get back to the necessity to vacate the creative process to do real practical learning, because there's new skills that we require. And we'll come back to that. When you said courage, I believe what I was thinking about then was that courage being manifest in how we invest in ourselves. Right. So what I do know about you, and this is something we have very much in common, within maybe some small margin of limitation, there's not a lot that we won't do to invest in ourselves. Right. And I've known you to do that over the years. And sometimes it just starts with, I'm buying this book, and then I'm buying this tool. So talk to me about the value of how self-investment kind of shows up in your life.
It's constant. So, our relationship just in music alone goes back over 20 years, right? And we've talked about how music, to the degree that we've been able to do it and enjoy it, is a cash cow. So as quickly as the technology is advancing, you find yourself having to upgrade, whether it's software, which can be costly, or it's hardware, which can be even more costly. The transition of utilities, how hardware used to be the big thing and you had all these racks of gear 20 years ago. Now it's all in one box. It's in the laptop, so making the financial investment is huge. You just got to be ready to understand you and your dream are worth whatever the cost margin is going to be, right? But then time is an even greater investment, because I don't want to do anything halfway. I'm not
Right.
I'm not hobbying at things. I'm not wasting time. So I see it as an investment. So hours and hours, like we were talking earlier this morning, I'm up at 4:30 just because of the rest of my day. And I'm happy to jump up out of bed, excited, get cleaned up and get at it, because I'm learning some new skills to put me in front of this wave. Many people use it as an excuse to just tap out. They're like,
Right.
it's too much, too hard. Maybe they don't see the value proposition in investing the time. So I just go all in, man.
Right. Well, some people say, you got to go with what like, leave with the one that brought you here. You hear all kinds of stuff that people use to resist change. But when we talked the other day, you mentioned another word, immersion. So what does immersion mean to you?
Just going all in, truly investing and giving one's whole self over to a thing or an idea and losing yourself to it.
Right. So, and I think in that conversation, I kind of look at that from the standpoint of, if you want to say a seed, right? Like if you can take this one seed, plant it in an environment where it can grow, right? So you have to protect it and then allow it the opportunity to get roots. If you go through that process of nurturing that thing, being extremely diligent to that thing, when it grows, it can produce fruit forever. Right. And that's what I don't know that enough people have been able to experience in their lives, is that idea of immersing yourself into something, being truly focused, dedicated, truly self-accountable to that thing, and then allowing it the opportunity to become what it can, holds huge dividends. The other way that I've thought about it is in terms of creating these waves of success. So for me, I've seen that in my career, that 1 month, 6 week, 6 month, whatever that time frame is that it requires to be totally head down, commit yourself, that time, those resources to being able to develop, new learning, and then being able to demonstrate that, for me in my career, has created waves that have carried me for more than a decade. And you feel the wave, and even in light of your own humanity, the wave is kind of like a tsunami. Like, you can't stop it, right? And it goes against so many things that normally would stop it. And the reason I bring that up is I think people look for events. They're looking to succeed at this event, this thing, and they're not thinking about long-term sustainability. They're not thinking about, like the gift that keeps on giving. So I think that's one of the benefits of immersion. So back to investing in yourself. What about when it doesn't work? You don't see the result. You don't get the thing. You don't see the benefit or the income, whatever was the, one of the drivers for that. What about that?
Yeah, through that process, I've failed many times at many different things, and it's taught me how to manage my disappointments. I don't lose myself emotionally in the setback, because that's how I interpret it. I'm always of the mind that if I didn't meet my goal, if it didn't work out the way I envisioned or anticipated it, then there's something else I need to know. So I invest myself even further so that I can figure out what I need to know to make it work in the way I initially envisioned it.
Right. So then what about when you are connected then to other people who have less of an appetite to take the ride of self-investment, accountability to the group, self-learning. So now you're connected to people in this thing, whatever that thing is. How do you manage that piece of it?
I'm always focused on the vision. Like, nothing
Okay.
deters me from the vision. And I've come to understand that not everyone is involved for the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't choose to judge people or vilify people. Uh, I'm certainly not of that kind of cliche mindset. I do have a spiritual background,
Mm-hmm.
too, and some people are just here for a season. Other people are here for a reason. I believe both of those things are simultaneously true oftentimes, right? But
Okay.
I don't subscribe to that cliche. I just believe that there are people who have never really ever had to persevere to the degree that is necessary to live the life they imagine. Like,
Okay.
most of us settle for the life that we believe the world system has carved out for us.
Right.
We've been kind of cogs in a machine. And true creators and innovators, we just wired differently, man. Like, we see something, it means enough to us that we'll fight through the wave of the tsunami and find a way to use it as, a means of energy to get us where we want to be.
Right. So on this journey, then, what would you say is one of your most valuable lessons that you've learned in a setback? I won't call it a failure. So I think it's just all just education, right? We have the opportunity to learn about ourselves, like fill in the gaps of the knowledge, the things that we don't know. So there's setbacks. I don't know that we need to put the failure label on them, but what are some of the most valuable ones that you've discovered about yourself or anything else in a setback?
All right. So one, I think, and this is not in any specific order, but one is, I know that I'm a winner who is designed to win.
Okay.
So if I don't win, the game isn't over. That's
Right.
just me, right? I'm at some phase, some quarter, some hole on the course where I'm going to work through this because the W is waiting for me, right?
Right.
And then, but the second thing is I really learned this lesson and I've been able to apply it to every area of my life, to every endeavor now. I'm very careful with my shoulds. So certain things that are requirements for me, my shoulds, I don't choose to project them onto other people. You know,
Okay. Give me an example.
all right, so just uh, perseverance, right? Stick to itiveness, real commitment with integrity. I don't project that should on anyone else. You know, even if we've agreed upon a certain thing or certain set of things, you know, the truth shows up and I'm okay with it. I accept the truth when it arrives, right? When it reveals itself. But I don't feel like, oh, they shouldn't have bowed out or they should have kept going or they should have been as committed as me. My shoulds are my shoulds.
Okay. Because, and it's interesting you mentioned that because I think people use either that lack of commitment or the fact that people could interpret the quote unquote vision very differently. They could have different reasons for engaging and being involved, but they take all that as the reason why a thing did not come to pass. And it's not to say there aren't contributing factors, right? But I don't know that other people have to be blamed why something didn't occur. So this kind of takes us to two things that the one for specifically, I know we've talked about for a long time, is this whole idea of masterminds, right? And so I'll ask you to describe a mastermind, and then this idea that the current circumstance, at least from my view, will require a redefining and a different sense of community in order for us to really succeed. We will have to find ways to partner, everyone having their own, building their own, that they can put their name on alone. I don't see all that. And I think some of that is a misinterpretation of success anyway, that we look at images of people in social media, movies, television, the news, and we think that people are self-created, self-made, which is an illusion, right? That you can do this on an island. So let's go back to just the idea of a mastermind. We've talked, I think, both in very positive terms and sometimes even in frustration, because I don't know that even our connection over the years, we haven't always viewed it as a mastermind because there's too many empty seats at the table. Like, where are the rest of these cats that are supposed to be able to think in similar ways and mobilize themselves in certain ways? And we just, it's like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. It's like it was more than two people.
That's right.
Did we miss something? So anyway, so let's talk about masterminds and then we'll talk about community.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Jerry. A mastermind to me is a collective of people with many different skill sets, acumens, modalities, interests, but are able to come together to contribute all of those gifts and abilities to empower one another, right? I don't believe a mastermind is always together to service one particular vision, but I believe it's a contributing collective of people who are offering their energy towards the things that interest the group in their varying avenues.
Right. So meaning that we can partner, I can support your idea. I don't necessarily have to be part of it, right? I'm part of you, but that doesn't mean I'm in your thing, right? Your thing is your thing. I'm just here to support and encourage you, maybe help you find, maybe to mitigate or manage the risk, help you to find resources, that sort of thing. So there's a selflessness to a mastermind, which then just kind of segues us right into community. So when you look at the current dynamics in our society and in our economy, what are your thoughts around community?
Community is Wow, bro. Community is going to be like water, so essential. Now, I have the, and I'm grateful for this. I have the kind of intrinsic desire for people to come together. Um, I think we, um, instead of just me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe community is a coming together again of a number of different people with those different skills who have some desires in common, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want some of the same things generally. And community is going to be of the essence. You were talking earlier about no success is individual success,
Right.
and I think we live in an avatar driven society now where people think that the Michael Jordans and the LeBron Jameses and the Beyoncés and the Jay-Z's, that they're all self-made.
Mm-hmm.
When there are so many other pieces and people and moments that were a part of their upward trajectory to who they became known as.
Right.
The parents taking kids to practices or getting them into camps. The parent becoming the manager and plugging this iconic artist into these different venues and
Right.
opportunities. So yeah, that's what community is all about. And people who are averse to community are going to suffer in this new age.
Right. So I go back and forth a little bit. So I want to say I wonder sometimes, for me personally, I'll be a bit transparent here, is in my belief in community, in my just belief in human potential and what it is that we can accomplish. I sometimes wonder, and I'll have to add to, again, the idea that I believe that you can win from any position on the board, right? In my heart. I still wonder sometimes, for me personally, have I short circuited some of the success that I could have had because of my belief and investment in other people who don't see their own lives or those possibilities the same way, right? Have I cast my pearls before swine? You know, that whole thing, right? And it's like, man, I wish I didn't care so much about some of these things and some of these people, because I'll just keep giving. And but I do know that it matters where you plant the seed, right? If I have this seed with all this amazing potential and I put it on the sidewalk and I'm diligent to watering it and giving it sun, there's no way for it to gain root. There's no soil there. There's nothing there. Or and we know the parable, right? And if I take that seed and I sow it where there's weeds, right? Well, weeds are really, really aggressive, right? And weeds want every bit of every resource that's down there. And so my seed, with all of its potential and great intention, these weeds are like, yeah, there's no nutrients down here for you. And people don't understand that with plants, that they fight below the soil, right? They will kill each other beneath the soil, and weeds are very aggressive. So I believe in it, but I do have moments of pause, because sometimes I do wonder for myself if I'm over invested in an idea that other people haven't caught up to yet.
Huh. That's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting question. Is that what you're really questioning? That you're invested in an idea that people haven't caught up to? Or is the question, can people catch up to the idea and are they worth the investment?